plan a two-spirited conference for 1995.
There you have it, folks. That's the solution of sorts. We have to get together, organize, and collectively find our fit. Where did that phrase come from? Oh my gosh, it's time for finding our fit. And here we have again Susanna and her guest, Dr. John, not the musician, a different fellow, but you'll find his words musical. They'll resonate on your soul as two spirited people do on each other, and as we all do on each other. Forget how many spirits we have. We're all humans, and life is sacred, and we have to make sure we put the emphasis on all life, not just humans. So, enough of me. I'm going to back out. Susanna, take it away. And Dr. John, are you unmuted? Let's see, I muted you, but you should. There you, well, make sure you're unmuted. Um, but anyway, check it
Okay.
out.
All
There you
right.
go. You're good. You're good. All right. Well, I'm going to back out as I promised earlier. Take it away. The phones aren't working, and let me know if you need something.
Okay, thank you so much, Ron, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Finding Our Fit. I'm Susanna Wupong Calvert, and purpose of our show is to find our place in our crazy and beautiful world. And in so doing, we can enrich our world and create a brighter future for everyone and everything, especially Earth. I'm also the founder and executive director of the Foundation for Family and Community Healing, whose mission is also to help everyone find our fit through mental, emotional, and relationship resilience skill education. So check us out after the show and come find your fit with us at healingedu.org. We do this program to help us make sense of our crazy and beautiful world so that we can choose the more beautiful side. Often we just focus on the crazy things in our life, forgetting that the flip side is where we can find and create opportunity, wisdom, and healing. In Finding Our Fit, we focus on learning, growth, and how to become wiser and more resilient by adopting a healthier relationship with ourselves, everybody, and everything. It's important to embrace both that yin and the yang, both the challenging and rewarding parts of life, to create balance and conditions for healing. It's a practice that we choose every day. Excuse me. In today's show, we're going to cover a topic which I feel exemplifies the problem that often presents in an extreme form, where we often then ignore when it is present in smaller doses or amounts. So in other words, we just focus on this big, huge problem, not realizing that it is also present in smaller quantities and forms and showing up in other ways. Of course, we should pay attention to the big problem, but by overlooking the smaller expressions of it, we are also missing out on opportunities when they don't rise above that threshold. But the opportunity also is lost if we are not, if we're ignoring the ways that we could take small steps to healing or resolving those small problems, and also starting to address the larger problem in the process. This is especially important because these big problems often just feel like they're so big we don't even know what to do about it. So in this way, addressing the smaller version of the big problem, we can make progress on both. So today's topic, I think, is a really great example of the big problem, but also ways that the little problem shows up throughout our life, but can be addressed with small steps that can help in so many ways that we can't necessarily, that we don't necessarily see right away. And so the topic that we'll be discussing today is called glossophobia. I had to learn this word recently from Dr. John, which, according to Dr. John, translates in the extreme form as fear of public speaking. I remember back from my undergraduate days, and that has been decades ago, in speech class, where we were told that public speaking is the number one fear, with death being number two. So what is this that is more scary than death, and why? And what are we to do about it? So that's really a profound question. Dr. John's going to break it down for us in a way that feels real and relevant in our life, whether we are public speaking or not, and can help us address and heal this uh, this huge thing, this huge fear that can express in our lives and rear its ugly head. So, love to welcome back to the show Dr. John Igwebuike, Executive Director of Lead Listening Institute, here to discuss America's number one fear and what to do about it. So, welcome back to Finding Our Fit, Dr. John.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I feel so very welcome. You've done a tremendous job laying the foundation for what we're going to learn about, listen about today. So thanks for having me. You know, I share with audiences, we've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So I thank you that you have invited me back twice. So thank you.
Yes. Well, you did such a great job the last time, and it just felt too long since we had you back, and we learned so much last time you were here. And I will endeavor to use my 2 ears more than my 1 mouth in what's left of our time together. So, Dr. John, remind the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do and why you do what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Again, my name is John Igwebuike, and I'm the founder of the Lead Listening Institute. This is an institute that focuses in on sharing the important role that listening plays in our lives, in our relationships, in our careers, in being a human being. I have discovered, and I discovered at a very, really late age, I discovered in college that I had not had any training, any coaching, any education, any class, any course on effective listening. And yet I thought I was really good at it. And it was not until there was a classmate of mine in a graduate class who did an icebreaker on listening that I discovered, and my eyes were open, that boy, I can really do a better job in this area. And as I began to do a deep dive, I discovered there are many people who have never had any type of course or training in this vital area. There are 4 ways we communicate, as you know, in terms of verbal communication: the reading, the writing, the speaking, and the listening. And while we are trained and we take classes on reading and writing and speaking, we take little to no courses in the area of effective listening. And I find that very interesting. If a child were to come home on their report card and they didn't do well in reading or writing or their speaking class, parents would be very concerned. But if the child has no training in listening, we kind of don't even think twice about that. Well, I'm trying to raise awareness through the Institute that listening is something we ought to normalize alongside the speaking, the reading, the writing. I'm not saying let's focus on listening to the detriment of the others. I'm just saying let's elevate that and normalize that as we do all the other forms of communication. I think there's so much that we're missing out on, and that can be gained if we listen a little bit more, talk a little less.
Right. It's just creating more balance in the communication, right? Because where we're trained and where we're focused is about conveying, and being clear, which is really important. But what comes back, and then it goes beyond just hearing, right? Like there's a difference between hearing and listening. And just um, um, having a both and, so that if somebody, even if you are communicating clearly or you're expressing yourself clearly, that then the receiver is also listening effectively too,
Yes.
or and vice versa.
Yes.
So what is the difference, Dr. John, between listening and hearing?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Hearing we are born with, it comes with us at birth. And listening is something that we learn, we cultivate. It's about behavior. It's about belief. Uh, Listening is something that involves our mind, our and when it comes to hearing, it, like you said earlier, it's about our ears. It's about how do we perceive sound. A person can, uh, some of the greatest listeners I know are individuals, brothers, sisters, family members who are in the deaf, hard of hearing community. So
Hmm.
we can indeed listen because it involves our entire being, looking, using our eyes, using our body language to pause, looking at how the person is expressing themselves, listening for the silence. All of that is listening, and it goes far beyond just the two ears. In fact, earlier I said, that I share that we have two ears and one mouth. And getting at that distinction between hearing and listening, I submit also we have three ears. In addition to the ears on top and on the side of our heads, we have an inner ear in the middle of our heart, right? You write that word heart in there, and you see in the middle, you see EAR. There's that heart. And I think it's that heart that individuals are really seeking when we're engaging in the communicative act of listening.
Wow, wow. So I just want to like just pause to applaud that. Like I just love that so much, because it's it's an empathic listening, really, right? Like we're involving our heart, our feelings in it. We're taking in the emotional information as well as just the factual of what's being conveyed. So yes. Thank you, Dr. John. I mean, that makes I feel like that's just one of many pearls that I've gotten from you in conversation.
Mm.
So can you also distinguish between, okay, you've already distinguished between hearing and listening, but can you distinguish between listening and understanding?
Yes, indeed. For example, and I'm going to pull in a little bit more about the hearing listening distinction in order to refine the understanding piece. Ok, hearing happens dynamically in the moment, right? You and I are having this exchange now, and you're able to perceive the sound, and your audience, your listeners are able to perceive the sound now. Listening has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a before, there's a during, there's an after. I think that's even more proper. Before, during, after. In fact, that's the subtitle of my book, I Want to Hear You. Before, during, after. So the listener comprehends that if I'm really to find out what the person before me is seeking to share, seeking to articulate, the message they want me to take away, I want to listen before, meaning I want to prepare myself so that I can come into that engagement and be fully present for the person. Then, while the person is sharing, I want to be able to give the gift of my presence to fully receive what they have to say. And then, after, to be able to reflect on what has been shared. Okay, so in that reflection, in the after, many think that after a person has shared something, now it's my turn to share. When in reality, that after is now the opportunity to confirm what the person has just shared. If I understood you correctly, is this what you meant? I just heard you share earlier that we're going to discuss about bigger issues and then how the smaller issues can seem to drive the larger issues. Is that what you shared at the beginning of the program? So the point is that after is the opportunity to confirm understanding. But here's the key. It's not to confirm the understanding from the listener's point of view. My goal is to confirm understanding from the speaker's point of view. You see, that's the key. I'm listening and I want to confirm, I want to reflect back from the speaker, from the person before me's point of view, not my point of view. That orientation is going to alter how I ask my questions, right? I'm not going to ask questions in order to satisfy my curiosity. I'm asking questions I'm going to ask those questions to help the speaker confirm their initial meaning, what they're trying to share, so that they can feel understood. I'm seeking first to understand. Then later, when we switch, to be understood. So understanding is very different from listening. Listening is the bridge to that understanding, indeed, just like hearing can be the bridge to my listening. But understanding goes a little bit deeper because I'm trying to use my hearing, I'm trying to use my listening to make sure that the person before me and what the meaning they're seeking to make is understood. Yeah, by me, but ultimately by them, by them.
Wow. That's so illuminating. And you're saying that really the hearing and listening and understanding process is very other focused. So the point is to understand their meaning, help them understand their meaning as well in the process.
You know, it's so awesome to have such a great listener on the other side here who's understanding what I have to say. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, John. Thank you. My pleasure. Likewise, it's very reciprocal. So this is WRWK 93.9 FM, Finding Our Fit. I'm Susanna Wupong Calvert here with Dr. John Igwebuike, Executive Director and founder of the Lead Listening Institute. We are discussing, or about to discuss, anyway, America's #1 fear and what to do about it. And listeners, we'd love to hear from you and listen to you and understand you. You can give us a call at 804-464-1089, or if you're on Facebook Live, pop something in the chat. So, Dr. John, I would like to make sure we get to the topic at hand. And this was a wonderful review. Thank you so much. I really encourage listeners, if you want to hear the full interview with Dr. John from last year, where we really talked about listening and hearing and understanding in great detail, well, some detail, you could go to our YouTube channel and recover the video from there. But what we really wanted to talk about today, in addition, was this term glossophobia, fear of speaking. And with fear of speaking, public speaking being the big fear, but it also breaks down to our daily life, whether you're giving a presentation or not. Now, can you please explain this again? Dr. John, you explained it to me earlier, but for the benefit of the listeners, can you break this down as to how glossophobia affects our daily lives and why it matters?
Yes, indeed. Glossophobia. What is glossophobia? Glossophobia, if you look at Merriam-Webster, it is defined as the fear of public speaking. Okay, that's the denotative definition, the dictionary definition of the word, fear of public speaking. It's one of the most common fear that Americans have. According to the Book of Lists, it's the number one fear that Americans have. The Pew Research wanted to follow up on that study, and Pew identified it again as one of the most topmost fears Americans have. Pew found it as number two. The point is, it's very common. The denotative definition, fear of public speaking, but as a listening practitioner, and I love that word, by the way, Susan, that you called your audience listeners. Oh, I just love that. So listeners, the connotative definition of glossophobia, what really underlies it is the fear of not being heard. That's what's underneath glossophobia. That's what's driving it. That's the impetus why we have that fear when we get up to speak. What if they laugh at me? What if I feel humiliated? What if they don't laugh at my jokes? What if they don't like what I say? What if they don't clap? All of these are really attributes of this fear of not being heard, not being understood, not being accepted. That's what's driving. That is indeed what is driving glossophobia. And it manifests in so many ways, right? It manifests in our relationships. It manifests in things that end up not being shared that should be and could be shared, but for the fact of glossophobia. So glossophobia is a fear. And here's how I define fears, by the way. False expectations appearing real. They appear real, but they're really phantoms, right? They're phantoms. Human beings only have two fears, just two fears. And they're really not fears. In fact, I don't even like using that word to ascribe it. It's fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. They're really not fears. They're really instincts. You're born with it. Here's why I'm sharing that. The glossophobia, the fear, is really the fear is in our ear. Here's what I mean. The word fear, you spell it F-E-A-R. You see, there's that ear and fear. Inside your ear is the mechanism that keeps you from falling. Inside your ear is the mechanism that warns you and alerts you to loud noises. Those two instincts alone are the only fears, and again, they're instincts, that human beings have. All other fears is because of the stories we tell ourselves in our minds, right? Those stories. Hence, glossophobia is a fear that we can overcome. And you know how we overcome it? L-I-S-T-E-N. But before I go too far, Malcolm Gladwell has done some work in this area on glossophobia. I don't know if you've read his book, Outliers. He looks at airline crashes, okay, which has sometimes come up in the list of fears. And he discovered, according to his research in Outliers, that if you're on a plane, the number one concern you should have is not the hardware of the plane. It's not the software of the plane. It's not the avionics or the mechanics. The biggest cause of airline crashes, looking over decades of crashes that have taken place in the United States, it's not the hardware. It's the communication ability of the crew. It's when one co-pilot sees a problem and doesn't communicate it to the other pilots, right? You see, the modern plane today Modern planes are so sophisticated, there's not a single human being alone who can pilot a jumbo jet by themselves. You need a crew that well communicates and does not have fear of glossophobia. So that's one way it manifests. So Gladwell discovered when they researched those crashes, it was not the airline crashes were the results of communication clashes. Mhm.
Clashes, like a miscommunication.
Well said. Or non-communication.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just said a lot in the last few minutes, Dr. John, and a few earth-shaking revelations, of course, as usual, and so interesting that our basic fears come back down to our ears in some way, either the loud noise or through the inner ear, fear of falling, and that are. So I guess what you're saying indirectly is that that our number one fear, glossophobia, public speaking, not being heard, accepted, not belonging, being rejected, also relates to our ear, and that they're essentially false expectations appearing real, and that manifests in all areas of our life. The example you gave was an airplane, which again is kind of an extreme example, 'cause, like, we're not flying every day, and thankfully planes don't. Well, I guess they do crash every day, but it's probably less common than us choosing not to speak up because of our fear of rejection, right? And so that false expectation or the belief that we will be rejected, although that could happen, but these false expectations that are probably blown out of proportion for the most of the time, not always, can affect every aspect of our life, every relationship, to the point it could cause things like plane crashes and death and so on, but also smaller consequences that can feel just as real, like losing a loved one, becoming alienated, having conflict in our lives, feeling alone and estranged, right? Loneliness is its own epidemic, according to our Surgeon General, and a lot of research. So it really is just so pervasive in every way.
It certainly is, and thank you for that recapitulation. Very well said. Another example, and I know it's a little bit extreme, is in the area of in hospitals. Many health issues could be avoided if, for example, during a surgery, a surgeon who sees an issue feels free, feels open, feels unjudged to be able to speak out and say, I think we forgot to sew over here. I forgot we need to suture another one over here. So it plays out in so many areas of our lives, in our careers, and like you said, as you well said, in our relationships. In the book Crucial Conversations, that's one of the biggest problems and issues, how conversations become really crucial, is that the time that begins to lapse when nothing gets said. We know there's an issue, there's a problem, there's a conversation that needs to be had, but because of glossophobia, this fear that if I speak, that I don't know what's going to happen, or these stories, the reels in our mind start playing, the conversation is not had. And as a consequence, the resolution or the opportunity for potential resolution never takes place.
Yes. I mean, you can really just imagine the ripples and impacts of even the smallest miscommunication or failure to communicate really affecting everything and everybody from the smallest to the largest interaction. So this is WRWK 93.9 FM. I'm Susanna Wupong Calvert, and this is Finding Our Fit. I have the pleasure today to be here with Dr. John Igwebuike, Executive Director and founder of the Lead Listening Institute. We're discussing America's #1 fear and what to do about it. So give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Phone number is 804-464-1089, or if you're on Facebook, drop something in the chat. We'd love to hear your questions, comments, or stories. So, Dr. John, you've been enlightening us in so many ways already, and is always the case whenever I have the privilege to chat with you. Can you talk a little bit more about listening and the fear of not being heard or accepted? So I think what you're saying is that, like, if I have glossophobia, and we probably all do to some degree, various degrees, that listening can be the antidote to that, but it's an antidote that somebody who is other focused can provide to the speaker, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
And so by me being a good listener, I'm maybe paying it forward. I'm being kind and compassionate. I'm being caring for the other person, or caring for our relationship or our work product. So I think I'm hearing you say that listening is something we do for each other to help allay each other's glossophobia. So can you talk about that relationship between glossophobia and listening in some more detail?
By all means, and thank you so much for setting that up again. Okay, glossophobia, #1 fear, right? Let's peel that back. Let's go a little bit deeper. According to William James, the putative founder of psychology, he asserts that the deepest craving of the human soul, is to be understood. We thirst for it. We long for it. A little child coming out of the mother's womb and howling, that little child is crying to be understood. That this is a deep need for us to be understood. That's the need that the speaker has, the person sharing has when they share. It's not just about the content. It's not just about the point they're trying to get across. They, as a human being, want to be understood. All right. In addition, put a pin on what I just shared on the deepest craving of the human soul. Now, let's look at another issue. Let's look at the listener. What's the biggest barrier to effective listening? The biggest barrier I would submit to you to effective listening is this: judgment, evaluation, right? Let me speak for myself, my biggest challenge. In fact, research shows it. The #1 challenge the listener has is not to be judging the speaker or the speaker's words, but to just allow the person to express. But all too often, as the person is expressing, we're judging their clothes, what they're saying, their background, right? The biggest barrier to effective communication is our not judging, our not evaluating, our not approving or disapproving with what the person says, our not agreeing or disagreeing with it, our not giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but to just allow the person to share. I call it, you see this, I brought this for your audience.
Yeah.
Turn around. Here it is. There we go. Hot sauce. Okay. There's a story about Barack Obama. He had gone to this famous restaurant in Louisiana, New Orleans. And the chef there brought him her famous gumbo. Okay. The first thing he does is he gets up the hot sauce and he starts putting the hot sauce in the gumbo. Now, he hasn't even tasted it. And what the chef does, she smacks his hands. She says, "Don't you put hot sauce in my gumbo." In other words, don't you evaluate what I've given you and you've not even tried it. That is precisely what we do. That's the common tendency we have as listeners, is we will judge, we will evaluate what a person is saying before they've even finished saying it. We are putting the hot sauce in their gumbo. As a result, listeners, stay with me with this. I know this is a little deep, but I know you can handle it because you're listeners. When we are evaluating what a person is saying, when we're judging what they're saying, when we're approving or disapproving, or when we're giving it a like, right, or dislike, or we're forwarding it to somebody else, right, on the internet. I'm using these internet examples. What if we stop doing? We have stopped listening. What have we done? I'm no longer being swift to listen and slow to speak. I've now become quick to speak in my mind and slow to listen. I'm no longer seeking first to understand and then to be understood. I'm silently seeking to be understood. I'm no longer using my 3 ears, the 2 on the side, the one in my heart. I'm now using my 1 mouth, right? I have subtly moved the conversation from the speaker and made myself the spotlight. You know why? Do you know why? Because I too had that deep craving to be understood. I too, like William James has said, am demonstrating my thirst, my hunger. My hunger to be understood. The very thing that the speaker is desiring from me, I've now co-opted it for myself. That's the biggest barrier to effective listening. And so we have this big barrier coupling with the speaker's deepest craving, leading to glossophobia.
It's like a competition. It's like survival of the species, right? Like, if I'm not heard, I'm going to die kind of thing, right? And so my need to be heard is more important than your need to be heard. And I think I want to just add, like, so beautifully explained, Dr. John, thank you, as always. I want to add, like, that judgment and evaluation can be like super fast, because even just having an emotional reaction to something is a judgment or evaluation, right? Even if you're not thinking, I think that's stupid, or gosh, that tie's a little too orange. you know, even if you're not thinking it, you might just be having a reaction. Just playing me a little. That results in the same outcome, basically, right?
And in that moment, you have stopped doing that which the speaker wants you deeply to do. You have stopped taking the time to listen.
Yeah. And the irony is that when that happens and you start speaking, you're less likely to be listened to by the speaker you just evaluated, right?
Absolutely.
It becomes like this downward spiral in communication. Like when you stop listening, that speaker is less likely to listen to you as a result.
They're less likely to listen to you as a result, and you're less likely to really get the fullness of what the speaker is aiming to share because you're judging or evaluating or approving or disapproving or giving the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Communication is a two-way street, right? The better listener I can be to you, the more you're likely to share more freely, more openly, more authentically, and deeply, right?
Yeah.
The more you can share more information, more content, and the more you can understand yourself better as the speaker. And that's the key, is to help the speaker understand themselves better, right?
Yeah. And when they understand themselves better and you understand yourself better and we understand each other better, then planes are less likely to crash, people less likely to die on the operating table. We're likely to have more intimate and resilient and effective relationships, more harmonious, more able to resolve conflict and avoid misunderstanding, right? Is that correct, Dr. John?
Right on. And I was doing my best not to jump in there.
Well done. Please.
Yes, you are spot on. Furthermore, the person before you is more likely, like you said earlier, to listen to you. The person before you is more likely to calm down, right? Less like we're tamping down the glossophobia. You see, when glossophobia is present, when fear is present, neurochemically, cortisol is present, right? That's a stress hormone, right? Adrenaline is present. That makes your heart beat a little bit faster. But when listening is present, right? The person's able to calm down. They are able to breathe in a little bit deeper and then exhale, right? And the deeper you breathe, right? We're both able to breathe deeper. The deeper you breathe, the deeper you can listen, right? The deeper now they're listening to themselves and then can come forth with deep insights to share with you. So I wanted to just build on what you shared, that this has the potential, right, to promote wellness. This has the potential to promote healing. In fact, science has shown that when we listen to another human being, there's 4 neurochemicals. These are positive neurochemicals that flood the brain. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins.
All the good stuff.
All the happy chemicals flood not just the speaker's brain, but also the listener's brain, right? Because of this positive interchange, because we're tamping down the glossophobia.
Well said. And when we're breathing deeper and we're having positive emotions, our cognitive capacity improves, right? So we are better able to think and understand and problem solve and integrate information. So there again, you're going to have better outcomes for everybody, better health, better relationships, all of that, not just wellness, but well-being, our ability to flourish. And what if we did that as a group, as a community? And you know, and the amazing thing, John, that this never fails to amaze me. It all happens in that microsecond, right? when you're sitting there and you either flip into judgment and evaluation, and it can happen instantaneously and unconsciously or subconsciously, or whether you're choosing to be in listening mode and allow yourself to be flooded with all those yummy hormones, right?
Excellent. And it goes back to what you shared earlier, that wonderful question at the top of the hour where you asked, what is the distinction with hearing and listening? Hearing it happens by chance, right? Listening is a choice. In that second, we can make that choice to tune in, to be present, right? To breathe in deeply, right? And really listen into what that person is trying to share.
Beautiful. This is WRWK 93.9 FM, Finding Our Fit. I am Susanna Wu-Pong Calvert, having the pleasure of chatting with Dr. John Igwebuike, founder and executive director of the Lead Listening Institute. We're having a great time discussing America's number one fear and what to do about it. So if you want to tell us about your fear or your solutions, give us a call at 804-464-1089. Or if you're on Facebook, pop something in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so Dr. John, I think you've very eloquently teed up the argument for the importance of listening. And if we could change course a little bit and talk about the how-tos, because on Finding Our Fit, we always want to leave listeners with things they can go do right away. So we have let's allocate about 12 minutes for this. So it'll leave us a little time to wrap up. So what can you tell us about how we can become effective listeners and create all that beautiful understanding that leads to all those wonderful and yummy things as a result?
Oh wow! I love how you put that cuisine metaphors in my mind. One of the things we can do is there it is. Wait. WAIT. Ask ourselves in your mind, why am I talking? Why am I talking? Wait. Right? Allow the person to share. Wait. Pause. Allow for that pregnant pause. You mentioned earlier how sometimes having a conversation can seem like a competition. And I once heard this phrase, and I'm sure some in your listening audience have heard this phrase as well, that communication today has become a competitive exercise, that the person who draws the first breath is declared the listener, right? Wait. Ask yourself, why am I talking? Whenever I want to jump in, whenever I want to interrupt, interject, put in my 2 cents, I try to tell myself, John, wait. And I have been so amazed. Comments, the ideas that come forth when I wait. Another thing we can do, I shared earlier that when it comes to communication, the communicative act of listening, the skill of listening, the practice of listening, that there's 3 aspects, right? There's a before, during, and after. I want to just get back to that before. One of the things we can do is what Harvard University found in a study that they commissioned to find out, what do great listeners do? As a matter of fact, student audience, you can Google this and you can find this article yourself. In this article, Harvard, in this study, they found out some of the things great listeners do. And one of the top things great listeners do, you know what it is? They create safe psychological spaces where others can feel seen, heard, listened to, and understood, so that conversation and dialogue across commonalities and differences can be had freely, openly, and without judgment, evaluation. That's what great listeners do. They create that space, that psychological space of safety. Now, by safety, what I'm talking about is social safety, psychological safety. They create safe spaces. Okay, I'm a listening practitioner, so I'm gonna help Harvard out a little bit here. What great listeners do is, yeah, they create safe psychological spaces, but you know what they're really doing? They're creating safe spaces. You get that?
What did you say?
S-A-Y. They create say. They create the say in safe. They create a space where the person can say what's on their heart. That's what makes it safe. Is that making sense, audience? So if I'm going to effectively listen to you, I want to create an environment where you can say what's on your heart, what's on your mind, how you're feeling, right? Because the better I can create this environment, and let me also say, co-create this environment, right? The better we can create this environment together, then what are we doing? We're tamping down on the glossophobia, right? We're tamping down on the cortisol, on the adrenaline. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to flood the safe space with the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, the endorphins, those good healing hormones, right? Those good hormones that allow us to breathe in deeper, that foster energy and excitement, right? That promote peace and understanding. That's why great listeners create those say and safe spaces, right? So those are a couple things we can do. We can wait. Why am I talking? Do what the research has demonstrated as a best practice, create a safe space where a person can feel seen, heard, listened to, and understood, right? So that may mean, for example, person comes in, hey, can I get you some water? Where would you like to have a seat? How's your family doing? How are you doing? Would you like some coffee? Creating that safe space, that safe space, that safe space. What else can we do during the conversation, right? Well, let me give you an example of what a young lady did for me. All right. This is my daughter. I had just started a new position. And so she calls me one day. She says, Daddy, I'm calling, I'm giving you a listening check-in. Right? A listening check-in.
Neat.
This is my goodness, this is my 19-year-old daughter. She's nursing student at Ohio State. She's calling her father who started a new job, and she's doing a listening check. Where'd she get that? And she
From
says,
you.
Daddy, how's your new job coming? And at the time I said to her, I said, well, yeah, it's coming great. My biggest challenge is the place is just so large. I'm having a tough time, being able to find my office because it's just so capacious. And she says, she pauses, she waits, and she says, okay, Daddy, if I heard you correctly, she blew me away right there, right? She let me know right there. She's been listening. She's not waiting for her turn to speak. She's waiting for the opportunity to let me know she's listening, that she's seeking to understand. She says, okay, Daddy, to make sure I understood you clearly, what you said is, and she begins to repeat, she says, the place is so ginormous, you need some type of mobile app to help you navigate back to your office. Is that correct? I said, yes. Here's the point I'm driving at. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's what she was doing. She's listening, not to respond. She was listening to understand. By her doing that, I felt more fully heard, you see. By her doing that, I felt more ready to share a little bit more. This 19-year-old can do that for me. We can do that for one another.
Absolutely. And she made sure you knew that she was listening to you. Yeah. She didn't just do it silently. She conveyed it, her intention and her process, right? Yeah.
People don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. People want us to they don't want to just know we're listening. They want us to show we're listening. And you correctly captured that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. John. Another great insight. So, is there anything else you'd like to share in the next 2 minutes?
Next 2 minutes. Yeah, the final tip would be this is practice the listening sixers, 6 R's, okay? When a person has shared, you can R number one, you can repeat what they've said. One word. Okay? Then you can restate. Okay? You can restate. That's where you repeat back to them maybe 2 or 3 words. You can then rephrase. This is where you're rephrasing what they said in your language. You're again showing that you're listening. You can also rest, meaning accept the pause. You can wait. Then you can also recap. You can recap as Susanna has been doing so well in this interview. And then the final thing that we can do in these listening sixers, we can redo. We can redo the process. This is all forms of reflecting back to the person, letting them know that they're being heard. And in the process, again, we are reducing that glossophobia. We're creating an environment where people feel seen, heard, listened to, and understood.
Well, that was beautifully captured so succinctly, Dr. John, and I really loved what you said. That people don't care how much we know until we show that we care. Like just another really profound insight, because we often are just like we're so rewarded for what we know, but yeah, using that ear from our heart, right, is arguably as important or more important than the other two. So in the last couple minutes, I want to make sure that you tell our listeners how they can contact you or learn more about your work.
I thank you so much. You can find me, you can Google my name, John Igwebuike, or you can Google the Lee Listening Institute, and you will find me. In addition, if you go to www.leadlisteninginstitute, me as well, leadlisteninginstitute.com, you'll find me, www.leadlisteninginstitute.com. So thank you so much for that. And if you're interested in learning more, I've written a book. The book is entitled, I co-wrote it with my good friend, Dr. Peter Malik. It's called I Want to Hear You, and that is on Amazon. I also wrote a children's book, And the title is I Listen, and So Can You.
Ah, well, I and we are so grateful for your contribution to the world, Dr. John, to make it a more loving, caring, and healthier and more effective place of healing. And I also want to share that the Foundation for Family and Community Healing has 2 modules that are devoted to listening. One is called Hearing for Healing. I developed that with my best friend who's a clinical psychologist. And also, our newest module is called Become a Professional Listener. By Graham Bodie, who's a professor of communications at Ole Miss. Between the two, there's great resources there, and we also touch upon listening and empathic listening in our relationship well-being module. So you could come check those out. They're available on a gift economy to everyone, and they're great for your organization or workplace. And we'd love to work with organizations as well. Check us out there at healingedu.org. And now, listeners, now you remember or you know why I wanted to invite Dr. John back, full of so much wisdom and insight and practical tips as well. Thank you, John. And thank you, listeners. Back to you, Ron.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you. We're all finding our fit. Don't hold your breath. Find your fit the entire 7 days before the next show. Next show is very special too. Who's that woman you're going to have on, Susanna? You're going to have somebody from Eastern Europe.
Yes, her name's Monica Cure.
Wow.
Cure. Yep.
Looking forward to that. Always something fun. And finding our fit is a full-time job, as it turns out. Who knew, huh? Who knew? Yes, to keep thinking and learning. Oh, my God. I'm 76. I have to grow all over again. It never ends. Anyway, it kind of keeps me busy, though. So we'll wave goodbye to all your fans out there. Thank you again for being here. And folks, this is WR.